All right, I'd like to officially welcome all of you to the California Initiative to Advance Precision Medicine Symposium on Cancer Disparities Research. I'm Julianne McCall. I'm very proud to be the director of the initiative and serve as the director of precision medicine within the California Governor's Office of Planning and Research. I'm joined by my extraordinary staff, including Dr. David Reiner, who will be emceeing the remainder of this symposium. Before I pass off the microphone, I just want to thank the teams for the tremendous dedication that you've all shown. I remember May 1st, 2019, we gathered in the governor's office conference room to launch these projects, and the energy of the conversation and just the extraordinary hope shared across teams just gave me enormous inspiration. And I'm very proud that we've made it to this stage, very proud as a state to have supported such world-class researchers and community partners trying to help change and update the paradigm of community-driven and patient-focused research in cancer. So with those very brief remarks, I'm going to pass it off now to Dr. David Reiner, Science Officer in the Governor's Office of Planning and Research.
Hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here with you. Thank you, Dr. McCall, for that introduction. My name is David Reiner. I'm a Science Officer, which means I oversee our demonstration research projects, including our 3 projects on cancer. And we're delighted to welcome you to this symposium on those projects. We have 3 presentations today, one on each of those 3 cancer projects. And I'll just get right into it. Excuse me, one more thing. After the presentations, we'll have a discussion, followed by kind of a closeout, different closing remarks. So with that, I'll introduce our first speaker, Dr. Mrinali Patel. Dr. Patel is an associate professor in the Division of Oncology at the Stanford University School of Medicine. Her research involves developing and implementing interventions that overcome systems-level barriers to improve equitable, value-based cancer care delivery. Dr. Patel received her MPH and MD from the University of North Carolina and completed her residency in internal medicine, fellowship in hematology and oncology, and master's in science and health services research, all at Stanford University. Dr. Patel is joined by a few members of her team today, Dr. Lisa Goldman-Rosas, Isabel Duran, and Emily Wood. In this specific case, Dr. Patel had a family emergency and has pre-recorded her talk. So I'll stop sharing the screen, and Emily Wood will share the screen with that pre-recording.
Thank you, everyone. And just a note that we've noticed the audio is a little bit low, so you may need to turn up your speakers as I share it. I will try and have mine sharing at top volume. Thank you. I'll get started.
Hi, I'm Mrinali Patel. I am an oncologist at Stanford. I'm very happy to present our work. Again, we can't thank the funders and sponsors, CIAPM, enough for taking a chance on our project and allowing us to successfully, we think, address Latinx cancer care equity. And hopefully, with the preliminary results we present today, you will also agree that we've successfully achieved our aims. I'm so sorry I can't be there in person. I have a family emergency. We have an incredibly amazing, dedicated team of partners that include patient advocates, including our co-PIs, Isabel Duran, Lisa Goldman-Rosas, who's an epidemiologist at Stanford, Dale O'Brien, who's a community-based organization, who's Cancer Patients Alliance, Zach Kuntz, who's a medical oncologist at our local partner, Pacific Cancer Care in Monterey County, Dr. Nakwacha and Dr. Cuevas, who represent the Federally Qualified Health Clinic in Monterey County, Salinas, and our wonderful team of researchers, including Emily Wood, Lanzao, who's our statistician, and Ms. Reynaga, who's our research assistant. We also are very fortunate to have an incredible team of community health workers who are located in Monterey County, 2 of whom are working in Pacific Cancer Care, Jerry and Leslie, and Marion and Cassandra, who are working both in La Clinica. Our project aims were quite ambitious, but I'm happy to report that we have completed 3 of the 4 and are in process of assessing the 4th. Our first aim was to establish a community advisory board that was focused on addressing cancer care disparities with a keen focus on precision cancer care, and then to develop a community health worker precision care intervention in Pacific Cancer Care, a multi-level intervention in collaboration with our community advisory board to overcome disparities in equitable access and receipt of evidence-based precision medicine cancer care treatments, as well as testing. And then our third aim was to implement and evaluate this intervention, and finally to assess the financial impact of the intervention. Our timeline is shown here. We began in 2019, prior to the pandemic. We had our first CAB meeting held in August, which was in person. And now we have subsequently, since then, launched not only the multi-level intervention and the randomized trial with our first patient that was enrolled in 2021, but we also began a wraparound service with our federally qualified health clinics to also conduct an aspect for screening and prevention to evaluate for genetic testing for individuals that may have a very high risk of family history or may qualify for genetic testing. Our plans are to complete these projects by next year, as I mentioned, with AIM4. We've also added on several additional projects, including obtaining funding for navigation services through the American Cancer Society, as well as several innovation grants to expand work, specifically as it relates to health-related social needs screening for patients that are enrolled in the current trial, as well as additional patients that are being seen at Pacific Cancer Care. Our AIM1 shows here our Community Advisory Board. Again, as I mentioned, in August of 2019, we held our first in-person Community Advisory Board, and subsequently, due to the pandemic, had to quickly shift to virtual meetings, which has been the preference, actually, for most of the Advisory Board members. We have our last Advisory Board meeting next week, which is really exciting in Monterey County, and are excited to present these results there, as well as discuss sustainability. In between our meetings, we also were very fortunate to have Isabel Duran's group create a series of essentially newsletters to be disseminated out to all of the Community Advisory Board members, and many of which were either discussing reaching the goals or highlighting community health workers or actually talking about getting out the vaccine, given the fact that we quickly had to shift gears as the pandemic encroached upon us. I'm going to talk briefly about the prevention and screening, which was not actually the cancer care delivery intervention, but it was an add-on. Here we were really focused on trying to do what we know is already demonstrated as part of good quality care for individuals, and that's really trying to prevent cancers before they occur. But as part of this, we also wanted to include precision genetic testing for individuals. And so our team, along with the Community Advisory Board members, adapted the Stello tool, which is a screener for high-risk individuals that may have family history, and actually spits out a score that's validated. And for individuals who score greater than 1, greater than or equal to 1, there's a triage, and they are actually recommended for genetic testing. We're happy to share that with people if they're interested. Our preliminary findings were we conducted several outreach interventions and several outreach events, and were able to distribute almost 3,500 flyers. We also had 450 community health worker contacts with individuals in the community regarding basic screening. 158 people were approached to complete the Stello Family History Screener, and of those, a pretty high success rate, 153 people completed it due to our wonderful community health workers. 33 or 21% had a Stello score of equal to or greater than 1, which was indicating that there was a potential benefit for genetic testing. 7 of those ended up receiving genetic testing through Invitae, and received post-test counseling, which we created a pretty impressive workflow for with Clinica. I'm going to focus now on our randomized trial, which is what we were really funded for, and this was to determine whether a multi-level intervention that we adapted could improve patient knowledge of precision cancer care. That was actually an outcome determined by our community advisory board. Receipt of evidence-based treatment, specifically looking at molecular and genomic testing, but then also the subsequent treatments that would ensue after testing. Looking at patient activation and quality of life, mostly as an exploratory outcome, among low-income and racial and ethnic minorities who were diagnosed with cancers, we had a stratified enrollment looking at individuals for whom those genomic and molecular tests were recommended. And our hopes were that we were to be able to improve these outcomes for individuals in the intervention more than usual care. Our intervention, as I mentioned, was multi-level. We started with the clinician-facing intervention, which included clinician training after our ASCO annual meeting. Dr. Kuntz and several others in Pacific Cancer Care would conduct biannual trainings for clinicians to ensure that they were up to date on what the molecular marker testing should be for specific cancers, and ensuring that there was a pathway before we started. We ensured that there was a particular pathway along with our payers for molecular and genomic testing to be obtained on samples. Initially, our thought was to send the samples to Stanford, but we created a collaboration with Foundation One. Our second aspect of the intervention included community health workers, and we heard from many of our community advisory board members before we started that patient education regarding tumor testing was really important. It would add this extra layer of activating patients such that they could hopefully encourage their clinicians to order this test before they would start with therapy, and then also to help others in the community who may be diagnosed. And so we created a series with a now resident at UCSF. She's currently a medical student in Chicago. Created these wonderful infographics. We created a series of patient-facing informational tools, and then one-to-one structured conversations with our community health workers. In addition, we were able to receive follow-on funding from ASCO, a mentee of mine, Gladys Rodriguez, who's now at Northwestern, who created these wonderful patient-facing videos in Spanish that further augment the education that was being provided by the community health workers. Our inclusion criteria is pretty open. We wanted to include anyone with any cancer diagnosis. Again, I mentioned we stratified the analysis or stratified the enrollment by those cancers that would require genomic and molecular testing per NCCN guidelines at the time that we started the trial in 2019. And we included individuals that were 18 years of age or older, who had a capacity to verbally consent in either English or Spanish, and who had either public insurance, low income status, or insurance that was provided by a local health agricultural company in the area, or who were uninsured. And we excluded anyone who was planning on coming to Pacific Cancer Care only for a second opinion and were not planning on receiving additional care. You can see our study schema here. We randomized. Our goal was 110 to be able to see a benefit in patient knowledge that was clinically meaningful of about 1 point on a validated standardized questionnaire called the Molecular Profiling Knowledge Questions that we had adapted. We also obtained several repeated measures. We not only obtained information about patients' quality of life and their satisfaction with decision, but then we also repeated those measures over time up to 12 months. The duration of interactions with the community health worker and the clinician-facing intervention was over the year. We can show our preliminary results, which are actually hot off the press. We assessed, this is our flow diagram and our study flow of all patients through our randomized trial. There were a total of 1,390 that were randomized or assessed for eligibility, We excluded quite a few, so these individuals were screened from the electronic health record, and many of these did not have a cancer diagnosis or were not eligible. There were 71 who declined participation. Of those, we've reached our target of 110. 53 were randomized to the control, and 57 were randomized to the intervention. There were several that had died after follow-up at 3 and at 6 months, and there were only a handful, 3 that had withdrawn in the control group, and 2 that withdrew in the intervention group. We analyzed all of these individuals through an intent to treat, so I apologize, this slide is incorrect. There was analysis of 157 in the intervention group and 53 in the control group. Our preliminary demographics for the total cohort was a median age of 55 years. This is very different than most of my studies, very young population. Most indicated that they had a race of, actually did not list their race, and when we were able to obtain handwritten descriptions by race and ethnicity, most had indicated either Mexican or Hispanic as their race and did not preferred and did not think that their race was listed here. So that is the majority of the individuals. There were about 89 who had indicated and self-reported Hispanic as their ethnicity, with Spanish as their primary language. The majority had a high school diploma or GED or less, and the majority also had low annual incomes as indicated in the eligibility criteria. We also saw that a high proportion had other cancers, so this was a mix of both lung cancer as well as soft tissue cancer and leukemia. And then we also saw that individuals had a high history of GI cancers and breast cancers with a stage 3 or 4 diagnosis. Our primary outcome was looking at the change in patient knowledge over time from baseline to 3, 6, and 12 months. And this slide is showing at baseline the mean score. So you can see here in the blue dot, which is very small, so I apologize, but the blue dot shows the control group. And this is the mean score on a 6-item questionnaire that assesses whether or not individuals may understand the difference between somatic and germline testing, and also the impact of testing tumors in particular and the impact on treatment choices. And so you can see here they're pretty evenly matched at baseline, which is what we would hope. And then over time, the intervention group began to acquire more knowledge, with the split and difference appearing to be statistically significant over time. Again, we have not run statistics on this as of yet. We're waiting for our 12-month data to be completed. But this is actually what the scores are showing now, that we did achieve, it appears, our primary outcome of improving patient education over time. We are in the process of obtaining our secondary outcomes, which are evidence-based, receipt of evidence-based care, as well as looking at the impact on quality of life. And then we have conducted a series of implementation evaluation interviews to obtain more information about how to implement this at scale. One success of this project is that this is now part of usual care at Pacific Cancer Care. We've completed the study, and the community health workers are completely funded by the clinic itself. They have continued the intervention, as well as I mentioned, added on several other exciting interventions, and are really just part of usual care at the clinic, and continue to educate individuals not only on precision medicine, but are now educating individuals on advanced care planning, as well as conducting health-related social needs screening. And finally, we are hoping to develop a community toolkit that will have recorded trainings that are free online resources for community health workers nationally. We're hoping to include all of our materials that have been created by our group, and we'll be making that freely available online, and we'll be sharing that with you all. Again, I can't thank the sponsors enough for taking a chance on our study and allowing us to demonstrate the benefit of multi-level interventions on precision medicine cancer care, not only at the point of screening and testing, but also at the point of diagnosis and beyond. We really appreciate it, and again, I'm looking forward to hearing about the questions.
Thank you, Emily, for playing that video. We have time for one question. I know Dr. Patel isn't here, but Emily and Isabel are here, so maybe they could answer the question on Dr. Patel's behalf. I see Dr. Ramos with your hand raised. Go ahead.
Yes, so it was, I think, a really good study. Can somebody just give a quick synopsis? It was very difficult to hear.
Yes, I'm so sorry about that. So our study had two parts. The main portion that the majority of the presentation was covering was our randomized controlled trial that took place in a community oncology setting, Pacific Cancer Care, where we had folks who were randomized either to the treatment group where they would receive some supplemental support, including education about precision medicine that was provided by a community health worker. We had 2 bilingual community health workers who provided that education in one-on-one sessions where they would talk about, what is tumor testing, how might it guide your care, and then in the other group was the control, so continuing with usual care. We did surveys at baseline, 3, 6, and 12 months, and the primary outcome was looking at change in knowledge related to precision medicine. And so we had a 6-item survey that looked specifically at knowledge about precision medicine. It was adapted from a previously used measure, and that was, at the end where you were seeing the graph displaying the change in knowledge scores over time. Very preliminarily, it is looking like our group that was working with community health workers had a sustained increase in knowledge that was separating over time from the control group.
And so, sorry, all participants were diagnosed with cancer. Is that correct?
Yes,
okay.
All were diagnosed. Thank you.
And Dr. Ramos, from the community health worker piece where we were implementing them inside the clinic system with the intention, hopefully, of moving people into screening early for that early intervention and not late stage diagnosis. And of course, what we showed, in my mind, something that I've always been conscious of the value add of a community health worker is that they do outreach as well as inreach, so that they work not only with patients already there to help them get back to their screenings, et cetera, but it also reaches into community to raise that awareness and diminish some of the fear and other issues, including language barriers and some insurance barriers, so we can move them into those screenings and into a medical home. And so that what we tried to show was the value add both already in the cancer care, but also external to the value add of a community health worker along the cancer continuum. And while we don't have as much data like they do on the patient care side, what we saw was a real increase in activity of the community health worker, but we also saw the response of community who were constantly calling back to those workers for assistance and helping move them into those screenings to get better education and also to get those extracurricular resources that you don't normally find and were even more important during the whole COVID era in which there was a lot of challenge for this community. So I really think that the experiment for me, I think, worked very well. And I'm hoping that as we see more intentional commitment to having community health workers throughout systems, and not just in community, but working hand in hand and bridging with systems, I think we can begin to address some of those disparities.
Thank you, Emily and Isabel, and thank you for your question, Dr. Ramos. So I just wanted to thank all our speakers, Dr. Patel, who was able to just join us, Drs. Kim and Tamayo, and Dr. Ziv, as well as every member of their project team and community partners, as well as all the participants and patients and families that were engaged in the research. I also wanted to take a minute to acknowledge CIPM's former program officer and co-director, Dr. Shannon Muir, for her talented oversight of the Cancer Disparities portfolio for almost the whole duration, except for the last few months. I'd like to thank our advisors, Surgeon General Dr. Ramos, Mr. Ron, as well as our Advisory Council Chair, Dr. Laojian Sher, for joining the symposium, and we'll hear remarks from them towards the end of our discussion session today. So that concludes the recorded presentation session for today. So I'll stop the recording and then pass the mic to Julianne to open the discussion session.
Thank you so much, David. And to echo the expression of gratitude, like I mentioned in my opening remarks, it's been just a true privilege to allocate state funds uniquely to cancer disparities research projects with a precision medicine lens. The entire goal of our initiative is to demonstrate the promise and potential of precision medicine, and we really look forward to presenting an evaluation report to the legislature through a process that I'll mention toward the end of our symposium here in the final 40 minutes. But before we conclude,